I wish I had the mentality now that I did back then. But, as a kid growing up, it was more just like having fun, like the competitive thing, like, I lost more than I won.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast. In the evolution of life, a strong mind will often defeat a strong body. Those that are willing to get up time after time and become unbreakable truly understand the term "until death do us part." That eternal sleep is the only time to lay down for good. A relentless soul is amongst the most frightening weaponry to the adversary and enemy. The only way to win is in the death of the opponent or your own. There is no way around, there is only the way through. There is no time to blink, and there is no time to rest. A victorious warrior knows that a win will come at a cost. Each day will get more and more difficult, knowing that the only easy day was yesterday. I'm Kevin Donaldson, always here with Mike Falaise, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and now you can join. Of course, follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to. And on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we have a very, very special guest, somebody who I've been talking to for a couple months now, another Navy SEAL coming in here, but this Navy SEAL has so you embody, John, what this show is all about, and that's the never quit attitude, because the moment you quit, you could have just missed something good. But John Colins is here to talk about the suffering of a frogman. I can't thank you enough for coming in.
Kevin, thank you, man. I appreciate it. When I found out about your podcast, I thought this is the perfect platform for me to come on and tell my story.
Oh, you, like I said, you could have wrote the script for this entire show with your story. It's like, it blew me away. And I just love the fact that you never gave up. And we're going to get into that. But before we do, let's give a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police, but we do trust Toyota Hackensack. So if you're looking for a car, go to toyotahackensack.com. So, John, each week we take a question from our audience. This one comes from Matt Slam, some sort of number afterwards. What is one word that you hate and why? So words have a lot of power. Words can be visceral, they can be soft, they can be loving, but there's certain words in people's lexicon, in people's vocabulary, that's sort of just like, it's like a dagger going into your stomach. At least that's the way it is with me. And that's why I grabbed this question. So if you had one word to pick out, what is that word that
Victim. But victim, when people are using it to victimize themselves or to gain leverage, or, not like a victim of a crime or a victim of, some sort of assault or, like a just reason, but somebody that's playing the victim role.
Yeah, they take all that negative energy and they just use it for their own benefit.
It drives me nuts, because it's like, to me, like, nothing is weaker than that.
I think wives have a good they're very good at using the victim cards. And it starts with those comments. You always do, and I don't want to rag on wives, but
Sure.
But you always do this and you always do that.
Right.
Well, that's you playing the victim. That's you using my words in order to make yourself a victim.
Yeah.
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 So,
I mean, I'm not going to get into the wives thing,
but you got to stay married somehow.
That's touchy ground, but I mean, I hear what you're saying, and you're right. I mean, there's definitely a level of, you got to be able to pull back. I think that people, once they start to feel attacked and they're on their heels and they almost know, like, hey, we got you in our sights and we know what you're up to, then they play the victim card.
Well, you see this. So I coach youth sports, right? So you see this in youth sports, especially in the younger levels, because what'll happen is the other team will start talking trash and they'll get in people's head. Now, all of a sudden, you're a victim. You're a victim to their words. And they own you. When you become a victim, you become owned.
Totally.
And I teach my kids discipline. You got to have the discipline to take that verbiage out of their mouth and go back and give it back to them.
Yeah.
You don't play that victim. Be the victor
when
it comes to that stuff.
Totally.
Yeah. So that's a good one. I like that, victim. So mine is so I spent a lot of time in the mental health field, and I really focus on that because it's what broke me, but it's also what lifted me up. You know, for that short time, I was that victim inside my own mental health. And there's a word that people attach because people are throwing a lot of money at mental health these days. And there's a word that's attached to everybody who is a champion of mental health or tries to be a champion of mental health, and that's advocate.
Ooh.
That's advocate. And that word is one of those words. Every time I hear that, I pause and I'm like,
But are you?
Really? Well, think about that. Are you? Is there anything in the mental health field that you don't advocate for?
Right.
Do you advocate for somebody to be mentally unhealthy?
Right.
You know, so it's a stupid term. So I'm a warrior for mental health because warriors fight to the death.
There you go.
And I maybe it's me trying to differentiate myself from the field. I don't know. But when I hear that word advocate, holy cow, do I just lose my mind going, what are you doing?
It's got like a virtue signal type of like connotation to it, you know?
You know what? I never thought about that, and you're 100% correct. Virtue signaling.
Yeah.
Look at me. I'm standing up for this. It's kind of like somebody who is an anti-suicide advocate. Well, is there such a thing as somebody who advocates for suicide?
Yeah, right.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
So that's just my own little thing.
Yeah.
And I try not to let it bother me too
Right.
much because it's innocuous, it's stupid.
But there are those words that like just drive you up a wall, you know?
The name of this show, The Suffering Podcast, that word bothered a lot of people because they didn't get it. They didn't get it right away. They were like, oh, I don't want to listen. I don't want to listen to suffering. I was like, no, you don't understand. Suffering's a good word.
Yeah.
Suffering is a word that's going to bring you to the next level because you go to the gym. Well, guess what? Without any pain, there is no growth.
Totally. And that's actually like what drew me to your podcast was it's called the Suffering Podcast. I was like, what is this? Click. What are we talking about? You know, it's like, I'm all about it.
Tom, who does all our SEOs out there, Tom, get on that one. Just start capitalizing on that word suffering.
Yeah.
So Matt Slam, thank you for sending that question in. Keep sending in your questions and we will try to get them on the air. So John, you've lived a life that people read books about, that people write books about. And I'm so interested in the whole Navy SEAL lifestyle. I think everybody is because you are a band apart from the rest. Everybody sees you as the band apart from the rest of the world. And everybody tries to pick your brains, like kind of what makes you different? What makes you you? How did you get through that stuff? The most mentally challenging and physically challenging experience that anybody could ever go through. So that's why I'm so happy to have you in here. And we connected through Taylor Cavanaugh, which it's another guy who I admire you guys for what you did. But more importantly, I admire you for what you're capable of, for your capabilities of overcoming all this stuff. But before we get into that, let's find out a little bit about yourself because we got to lay the groundwork. Cool. We got to find out how you grew up because you can't just start in the middle and people say, oh, well, he was just born that way. I'm sure you weren't.
Right.
So how'd you grow up?
So grew up in a small town called Sykesville in Maryland.
Oh, you're an East Coast guy.
East Coast guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. I actually, I was thinking about driving down and visiting, but I got too much going on. But it's always cool to be back here and see the trees and all the green and stuff. I mean, out in California, it's not a lot of green. You got a lot of blue. I live close to the coast, so I see a lot of ocean. But
do you have any desert where you live? Or is that further
there's
east?
Some mountains and stuff, and the desert's not far from where I'm at now. But yeah, I grew up in Sykesville, oldest of three, got a younger brother, younger sister. My dad is a former state trooper. He was on the SWAT team for 20 years. He was a state trooper for 25. He kind of was the one that inspired me to go down that warrior route,
Was he a military guy?
No. So my grandfather was a Marine, and my dad said that if he didn't make it in the law enforcement, he would have joined the military.
What years was your grandfather in the Marines?
Oh, geez, he's a World War II vet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a reason I asked that.
Yeah.
So that's when boot camp
Right.
was Paris Island boot camp.
Legit.
You know, you got struck, you got hit with butts of rifles, you got screamed at and called every name in the book.
There's no safe word.
No. Yeah, that's so I've known a couple World War II vet Marines, and they're different. I've known Marines, you know, I gravitate towards Marines. I know Marines, and they're a different breed of human being.
Hard.
You know?
They're hard, badass dudes.
Well, how do you know somebody's in the Marines? You know how you can tell?
Their fucking haircut.
Well, you just ask them. They'll tell you all about it. They'll ask you, are you a Hollywood Marine or are you a Paris Island Marine?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's the same thing with SEAL teams. Are you a Hollywood SEAL or are you East Coast SEAL?
Oh yeah, you go to Coronado, but you know that Coronado Island is something special.
Dude, as soon as I cross that bridge, I'm like, I'm never leaving this place.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's you know, and I didn't go over to the compound. You know, I didn't get over there, but you know, so the cool thing about Coronado Island, that's where Frank Baum lived. Frank Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz. So there's supposed to be little things all throughout Coronado Island where he was inspired by The Wizard of Oz.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Because the last time I was out there, you know, across where the Navy ships come in, there's a Marriott. It's right by the convention center.
Yeah.
So I stayed there. Mind you, I was single. I was in my early 20s, and I was right by the gas lamp quarter.
Yeah, man. You got all the you've got all the factors for a good time.
And the people are different out there. Okay, so the first place we go when we land, we just had to get something to eat. We go to a Hooters, right? We know Hooters. And the waitress working at Hooters was unlike the waitresses working here on the East Coast. I'm looking at this girl, and I'm like, oh, my God, she is genetically engineered to be a Hooters girl. Yeah. And, you know, and Hooters is not your high-level restaurants.
What?
Well, the food's good enough, but
the wings are great. The beer's cold and the atmosphere is all right.
Yeah, but you know, and it's a different lifestyle out there. It's a slower lifestyle. And when I was out there, and I'm talking probably in 2000, it was clean. It was expensive, but it was clean.
Right.
It was nice. I had a good time. But my greatest joy when I was out there was to sit on my balcony. I faced the canal, and I would watch the Navy ships come in as the sun rose. Sun came up over my back. And it was one of the most peaceful times of my life. I never slept.
Yeah.
And that's why I get that draw to that San Diego area.
Yeah, man. It's got some great views. You know, it's especially like looking into Coronado or looking out into the city, like from Coronado. I mean, there's some pretty breathtaking views. And, you know, it's always cool to see, like, you know, the massive might of our Navy just cruising through the canals, you know.
When you see a big battleship coming through, and I'm sure they're not even the biggest battleships that can fit through that canal.
Oh, no.
And when you see those things coming through, you're like, oh, my gosh, man, how the hell do we ever lose a war?
Yeah, right.
You know?
Exactly.
So it's kind of cool to look at that. But, you know, you're a kid growing up in Maryland, and this is a world away for you. You know, play sports? Do you get involved in that stuff?
So growing up, football and wrestling were my first two, like, loves with sports. And then once I got into high school, I found lacrosse, and man, I wish I would have started that earlier, because I'm like, what? I get to like be a goon and just run around and like clock people with a stick and like maybe score a goal. But like, yeah, so those are my top three sports. I wrestled since I was in third grade. Same with football, maybe second grade with football. Just, you know, again, just running around head hunting. But yeah, man, I was just, you know, I talked to my dad about how I wish I had the mentality now that I did back then. But, you know, as a kid growing up, it was more just like having fun, you know, like the competitive thing, like, you know, I lost more than I won, and it is what it is. But if I had the mentality I had now,
could have done something. That's what I say all the time.
Yeah. But, you know, his response to me on that is like, well, you know, look what you did. So I'm like, all right, I can live with that. But I instill that into the kids who I coach. So when I can't do it anymore, you try to instill that lesson into the kids. Because I tell my kids all the time, I said, one day you're going to step off the field. Yeah. And whether it's by choice or whether you're taken out on an injury, you're never going to step back on that field as a player again. Right. So enjoy every damn minute of it. And it's important for them to get that, because you can only truly find out what your love is for something when it's taken away from you. 100%. You know, and I left college football because of an injury, and I never stepped back on the field. But by the time I left with an injury, I was done, man. I was like, this is becoming a job. I don't want to do this shit no more. Yeah.
Then I got into my late 20s, and I'm like, God, I wish I could strap on the pads one more time.
Yeah.
But by that time, that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
So
I feel like that's kind of the case with anything you love. It's like, that's why it's so important to take things for, or not take things for granted and appreciate like every moment of it. I got a couple things on that later, but yeah, it's, you don't know when your last day is, whether it's on earth or, in uniform or with your pads on or whatever it is. It's, that's why it's so key to just be in the moment, enjoy it, and, just be happy now, not look to the next horizon for like, hey, let me get there. And then, I'll be happy. It's like, look, happiness starts from within right now.
Try to treat life like a 15-minute layover, right? So I've said this on this show before. Try to treat life like a 15-minute layover. Like if you had 15 minutes to sit with anybody in the world, what would you say to them? What would you do? Is it going to be a love, or is it going to be a somebody who we've lost, or is it going to be, the questions that you ask? Try to live every day that same way, as if your 15 minutes is up at any moment.
I like that.
But unfortunately, that's a little pie in the sky. Doesn't always work out that way. You're rushing around, life gets in the way. So
you just have to like remind yourself of that. It's like, it's important to, start your day off right and get that first workout in, or get up early and get cracking on the day. And then you can learn to just kind of lean into it and appreciate it.
Well, what was your mindset playing sports back then?
I mean, I was just looking to hit people, football, lacrosse, wrestling was like, I learned a lot, but I also got beat a lot. And then I was just kind of like I wasn't as disciplined or tough as I should have been with it. But I guess that's why I, pick up jujitsu now. It's just to kind of get back on the mat. And, I'm always rolling with people that are better than me, just because, and that's how I've always been with anything, is like, I always work with people that know more than me, or are stronger than me, or are better than me. Like, I'm never the best guy out there, because once you're the best guy out there, you're the smartest guy in the room. It's like, you need to move rooms,
So do you want to be the best amongst the worst, or the worst amongst the best?
I want to be the worst amongst the best.
Me too. Me too.
Because you're never going to be the best, unless you're like, John Jones or something. But I mean, it's always, iron sharpens iron.
Mm-hmm.
And, even working out with guys training to go to buds, like I always worked out with guys that were faster than me, stronger than me, could like lift more than me. And it's funny because most of those guys quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I always made sure that like I pushed them too, it's like I wasn't like, it kept me in the red, just like pushing. And I know they weren't, easing up on me either. So
when you don't have what they have, you want what they have. But the person who has it all, what are you striving for?
Yeah.
You got nothing. There's no bar to reach. You know, you got a John Jones, right? So
right.
best in the world. What bar? Mike Tyson. What bar are you going to reach that's going to make you better? You're going to be better than Mike Tyson? No, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then you become complacent, and complacency kills, and that's a really bad thing. So what was your direction in high school? Did you kind of know what you want to do when you get out? Was college in the future?
As far back as I can recall, like I always wanted to be a SEAL. Being a kid, like all I wanted to do was run around with a gun and like shoot stuff. Did
you have that experience growing up? Were you shooting?
Not so much, but like I mean, I was running around with my brother, just playing cowboys and Indians or cops and robbers. Paintball. Did some paintball. This was before airsoft and all that, but once I got to high school, my parents had just gotten divorced, and I went to 3 different high schools because I was getting kind of kicked around, and I used my parents' divorce as kind of like an opportunity to do whatever I wanted. I just kind of mom and popped, and I played both sides, and I lost sight of my vision, and I was all about hanging out, smoking weed, partying. I wasn't, school to me was always seemed like an institution anyway, which is funny because now that's what people are talking about. But back then I was just like, man, I don't care about this. And I went to community college for a semester, and the reason I did that was just to hang out with my friends. And I'm like, all right, well now I'm just wasting my dad's money. He said he'd pay for 1 year of my school and, see how my grades were and then go from there. And then after a semester, I was like, I don't think this is for me.
Well, you felt nothing.
Nothing,
know?
nothing. And it's not that I don't like to learn. I'm always trying to learn something. I remember taking like a philosophy class, and I thought that was pretty cool. But I just being in a room with 4 walls and a clock and no windows, I'm like, this is just too close to prison for me.
Well, you're punching a clock in a lot of college, and a lot of kids do this in college. They
Right.
go to college because they're told that's what they have to do. So they just sit there and punch a clock. Okay, I got to sit here for a 2-hour class. Let me
Right.
just get through it. Let me.
Right.
But you're not absorbing. You don't have that hunger for anything.
No.
You got to go out and find your passion. With college, I did.
Yeah.
So I did. Well, number one, I paid for my own college, so I knew if I missed a class, it was coming out of my checkbook. So. It was a little bit different when it came. I was spending my own money.
Right.
And that kind of kept me accountable a little bit.
Oh, for sure.
But I still look back and I could have done more. I absolutely could have done more. I was underachieving when I was younger. And that sounds like your path too. Like you had the ability, you had the capability, you had no passion, and you were underachieving.
Yeah. Well, I saw what my friends were doing and what they were picking for their degrees, and I'm like, none of that sounds cool to me.